Canada is making a costly mistake with their move with China and their bet on electric vehicles. It'll mean lost jobs, weakened manufacturing, and vehicles that may not survive a Canadian winter. Canada's decision to slash tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles may be presented as a pragmatic trade adjustment, but the reality is far more troubling. What the Carney government calls a strategic partnership with China looks increasingly like a self-inflicted wound to Canada's auto industry, its workforce, and its long-term economic sovereignty. Lower prices today may come at a cost of lost manufacturing tomorrow. And that is never discussed. And the vehicles that struggle with quality and cold weather, the Chinese EVs, they have reliability issues in a country where winter is not a minor inconvenience, but a defining reality. Now, under the new agreement announced January 2026, Canada will allow up to 49,000 Chinese EVs into the country. Annually, it's a tariff rate of 6.1%, down from 100% that was imposed in 2024, and that meant no electric vehicles from China would come into Canada. Well, this is all about to change. While officials emphasize that this represents less than 3% of the domestic market, that figure understates the broader impact. Auto markets are shaped at the margins. Even a relatively small influx of aggressively priced vehicles that can disrupt pricing, undercut domestic producers, and discourage future investments. Canada's auto sector does not operate in isolation. It's deeply integrated with the United States, with parts, vehicles, labor flowing across the border daily. That system has supported hundreds of thousands of well-paying jobs for decades. Introducing low-cost Chinese imports into the ecosystem does not simply add consumer choice. It destabilizes a supply chain that's already under pressure from regulatory mandates, rising costs, and declining market share. That pressure is already visible. The combined market share of General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis in Canada has fallen from nearly 50% to roughly 36%. And these companies are not just brands on the dealership lot. They are employers, investors, and anchor tenants for the entire community. When their market position erodes, the consequences ripple outward in the form of plant closures, canceled expansion plans, and lost supplier contracts. Supporters of the deal argue that Chinese EVs will make electric vehicles more affordable, accelerating adoption and helping Canada meet emissions targets. But affordability without durability is a hollow promise. Many Chinese EVs entering global markets have yet to prove themselves in extreme climates. Cold weather is notoriously hard on batteries, reducing range, slowing charging times, and increasing mechanical stress. Canadian winters with sustained sub-zero temperatures, heavy snow, and road salt are all among the harshest environments any vehicle can face. Reports from colder regions that have already seen Chinese EV adoption raise legitimate concerns about performance degradation, software glitches, and inconsistent build quality. Battery thermal management systems that perform adequately in milder climates can struggle in the deep cold. Door handles freeze, sensors fail, range estimates become unreliable. And these are not minor inconveniences when temperatures plunge and the drivers depend on their vehicles for safety as much as transportation. Quality concerns extend beyond climate performance. Chinese automakers have made rapid progress, but speed has often come at the expense of long-term durability testing. Western manufacturers spend years validating vehicles under extreme cold temperatures and conditions, precisely because failure carries real consequences. A vehicle that looks competitive on paper or performs well in a controlled test may tell a very different story after several winters in Canadian road conditions. There is also the question of what happens to Canada's manufacturing base as these imports gain a foothold. History offers a clear lesson. When markets are flooded with low-cost vehicles produced under different labor standards and supported by state-backed industrial policy, domestic production suffers. Plants close, jobs disappear, skills erode, and once lost manufacturing capacity is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. Europe provides a cautionary example. In the rush to meet the climate targets, policymakers opened the door to inexpensive Chinese vehicles, only to find their domestic automakers squeezed between regulatory costs and subsidized foreign competition. The result has been declined investment, layoffs, and growing concern about long-term competitiveness. Canada risks repeating that mistake, but without Europe's scale or political leverage. The geopolitical implications cannot be ignored. Modern EVs are data collecting machines equipped with cameras, microphones, GPS tracking, and constant connectivity. And U.S. officials have repeatedly warned that Chinese-built vehicles pose national security risks, describing them as potential vectors for data collection and remote interference. Whether or not those fears are realized, perception matters. The United States has already signaled that Chinese EVs will not be allowed to cross the border, even temporarily. And that could be a problem because that puts Canadian consumers in an impossible position. A vehicle purchased legally in Canada could become a barrier to travel, commerce, and even family visits. The idea that a car could determine whether a driver is allowed to cross the world's longest undefended border should give policymakers pause. Instead, the Carney government appears willing to accept the risk as collateral damage in a broader trade dispute. Some Canadians, frustrated by U.S. tariffs and rhetoric, may view this pivot toward China as an act of defiance. But the trade policy driven by resentment rather than by realism rarely ends well. Replacing dependence on the United States with dependence on China does not restore sovereignty. It merely shifts leverage from one superpower to another, often with few shared values and less transparency. President Donald Trump has been clear about his position. He is open to Chinese companies building vehicles in the United States if they invest in American factories and employ American workers. What he opposes are imports that bypass domestic production and introduce security and economic risks. Canada's deal does nothing to address those concerns. Instead, it places Canadian workers and consumers squarely in the crossfire. The promise of cheaper EVs may sound appealing in the short term, but the long-term costs are becoming harder to ignore. Lost manufacturing jobs, weakened supply chains, unresolved quality and cold weather performance issues, and strained relations with Canada's largest trading partner are not abstract risks. They are predictable outcomes of a policy that prioritizes short-term optics over long-term resilience. Canada built its auto industry through integration, investment, and a commitment to quality. Undermining that foundation for a limited influx of low-cost imports is not a strategy. It's a gamble. And if history is any guide, it's a gamble Canadian workers, manufacturers, and drivers are likely to lose. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this, and check out our car review channel, Car Smarts. You can support me by buying me a cup of coffee, and if you want even more content, check out the links in the description. I'm Lauren Fix. Thank you so much for watching.